So welcome everyone to the third in this series of Think, Act, Change. It's a debate bringing together sustainability champions. Today's focus is on activating citizens as agents of change. And if you were at one of our last events, welcome back, hello. This is a space to burst bubbles and smash silos and build a community of thinkers, actors and changers. So let's hear where you're all from. Hello, you're from all over the place, that's great. Let me introduce myself first. So my name is Jo Sullivan. I partner with Thinkactchange with David, who you'll hear from in a moment. I'm also founder and director of Conscience, which is an activist consultancy based in Brussels, and I help NGOs, companies and institutions on strategic communication. So half my working life has been as a cause-driven entrepreneur, I realized. Firstly, in the Parliament, I was in corporate affairs and trade associations, then I was campaign director and communication director at two of the big European NGOs, first the European Consumer Organization and then Friends of the Earth on environmental issues. So my passion is for designing campaigns that bring systemic change. And bringing creative minds together for debate. So meet my partner now, David, over to you.
Hello everyone, old friends, new friends. I call myself an ethical storyteller. I've come through all kinds of different forms of content creation, from filmmaking, magazine editing, brand copywriting. I was working in London for some ad agencies for some very evil global brands when I realized that I hated myself. So I decided to change my life and I moved to Berlin, where I set up my ethical brand consultancy, Good Point. And that's about helping cause-driven organizations tell better stories to increase their impact. And Jo and I met last year. My girlfriend had moved to Brussels for work and I was coming here a lot, and Jo and I met and we really hit it off on some of these ideas. We realized, I'm just going to change the slide because this illustrates what I'm saying. That's the way to do it, right? Can you see that? So we realized that what I bring in terms of the storytelling angle and what she brings in terms of the strategic advocacy are quite complementary. And we are both very passionate about bringing different kinds of people together. So we came up with this idea and we took advantage of lockdown. You know, we're obviously privileged people who were able to have a fairly fruitful time during lockdown. So not to disparage people who had very difficult situations, but it was an opportunity for us to use the digital format, as we've all had learnings through Zoom. These technologies were there before, of course, and I know that everyone's approaching webinar burnout, but on the other hand, these can be used to bring all kinds of different people together. And I think that the lockdown has enabled us to see the full potential of that. So now we have Nony from Chile, we have the two from Brussels, we have Cecilia coming from Malmo. So it's really nice to see that in action. And hopefully this is something that we can bring into the post-lockdown scenario so that we can all create better collaborations for change. So yeah, should I introduce the speakers now? Did you want to say?
Yeah, just to kind of recap, but on the intention of Think, Act, Change. So, first it's to bring together sustainability pioneers to share transformational insights and to speed change by bursting bubbles and building bridges and making sure sustainability really stays at the top of the political agenda, because we saw the risks during COVID of that could all go to pot. So we're really keen on making sure sustainability and all its manifestations, whether that's oceans, climate, community, and of course social justice, stay at the top of the agenda. So David, speakers.
Okay, so we have a nice array of people hailing from different parts of the globe, as we said. So we've got two people from the famous EU bubble, two heads of unit from the Commission. I'm not going to group you into the same bag completely, but we have Tina Zornadzi. Sorry, that was kind of right, wasn't it? The Greek version? No. Okay, yes. So Tina is a head of unit for strategic communications, and she's also named by Politico as one of the women who shaped Brussels. And she's very much concerned with how the EU Green Deal can be communicated, including the pledge for carbon neutrality by 2050, can be communicated to the general public and a wide range of audiences. So Elena Vishnara Malinowska, how was that? It's good. Okay, I'm getting good at this. So you're also head of unit at the European Commission, and you're dealing with adaptation to climate change, cities and international cooperation. Specifically, you're handling what's known as the Climate Pact, which I mean, you're going to explain this much better than I am, but just broadly speaking, it's about getting different kinds of stakeholders to engage with the aims of the Green Deal. So you'll explain much better, I'm sure. So we also have Cecilia. Oh, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name. It's Mac Aliavi? No, not at all. Okay, well, you can tell us later. Cecilia, it's Cecilia joining from Malmö in Sweden. And Cecilia works for one of my personal favorite brands. And I happen to know that old friends from when I was living in Japan are actually in this call because they're also massive fans of Oatly, which is the pioneer of oat milk that started making oat milk in the 90s, and now oat milk's everywhere. And the Oatly brand is a really, really fun, sustainable approach. And so we're really excited to have you here because we believe that those kinds of businesses are really pushing the sustainability agenda. And finally, we have Jonathan, aka Nony Hertzfeld, joining from Santiago de Chile. Spare a thought for him because they have winter over there. Jonathan, or Nony, has founded a really wonderful festival called the International Festival for Social Innovation, which started in Santiago de Chile, but has spread to, I think, 15 cities throughout Latin America and Spain for the first time last year. And that's all about pairing social innovation pioneers together with, very popular musical acts so that they can bring whole new audiences into the topic of social impact. And their slogan is, "You can't fight music." So that's the guests that we have today.
Great. So our audience, thank you for checking in, everybody. You're from all over Europe, seems parts of the world as well. We have, I think, Singapore, we have the USA, certainly Argentina, many other countries, and a cross-spread across Europe. So thanks. We've also got a great balance. I was checking the guest list of business and civil society interests. Just a couple of mentions. We have pan-European networks for schools and social enterprise, citizens, health and environment, digital campaign groups, including one, and We Move, think tanks, European Institutes for Environment Policy, for Technology and Innovation, for Development Policy, and industry. Well represented from tech, media, packaging, transport, utilities, agriculture, finance, and furniture. So do share your thoughts and insights as we go along. I'm going to ask the first question to Tina, and Claire is also going to follow up on that. Tina, we last shared the stage just before the lockdown, if you remember. It seems a lifetime ago, but it was actually a few months ago. And so how has that affected your work to promote the European Green Deal? While economics and health have dominated the headlines, and how does the European Commission now motivate citizens to live more sustainably? We're really looking forward to hearing from you, and then also straight after from Elena, who's going to talk about specifically the Climate Pact, which is the climate engagement tool for citizens. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you very much, Joe. I hope I can remember, because I can't see the slides from my mosaic, so I'll try to remember, but Claire also will help remind me when I need to change. So thank you very much for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me and Elena to speak about what we're doing and what we're doing both pre and post pandemic, because as you rightly said, a lot has changed in the world, but some things haven't changed, and as you're going to see, our resolve to go ahead with the Green Deal as it was presented last December by the new Commission. And you can already go to the slide, the first slide about the Europe strategy. Just to remind people, I realize there's a lot of different audiences from all over, as you said, so I just wanted to remind people what this European Green Deal is about. It's actually a roadmap. It was presented by the new European Commission last December. It's a roadmap to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And the Green Deal roadmap itself is about changing almost every part of the economy and also society to make this goal come true. In fact, the way we see it is as an opportunity and a growth strategy. So this is the way it has been framed and how we see the road going forward. And for this, all the tools and all the budget and all the legislation, all the tools that the European Union has at its hands are going to be focused to get this to get to this goal. It means fundamentally transforming our life and our economies, and that's why it needs the participation of everyone. And as you can see, it's not just the European Union, it's the governments, it's the industry, and it's people, consumers, and everybody around who needs to get involved and be committed to this transformation for this to succeed. So if we look at the next slide, this was in May. I just wanted to remind people, so this was, the Green Deal was the first big and the biggest rather declaration that the new Commission made last December. And then certain things started unfolding according to plan, and then COVID came. Many people thought that this pandemic was an opportunity or a reason for us to redirect our efforts to dealing with the pandemic, which we did deal with the pandemic, and that we should slow down on some of the other targets since the economy was suffering so much. Far from doing so, the Commission President, when she announced the big recovery plan, as it's called, at the European Parliament in May, a few weeks ago, she made this statement, which I think is indicative of the direction the Commission is going, that sooner or later our scientists and researchers will develop a vaccine against the coronavirus. You can see that, right? Yeah, okay. But for climate change, there's no vaccine. And this is why we need to invest in a clean future. And she goes on to say where the money is coming from, and that's an investment in our children's future. And she also said after that when we come out of the crisis, it's important that we do not fall into our old habits. And we must not hold on to yesterday's economy as we rebuild. And this is what has been driving our vision, the way forward. And just to, if we can move to the next slide, just to remind people how this Green Deal, to see the whole spectrum of activity and transformation that it involves. There's at least 11 big areas of action. And starting with the climate law that Elena is going to, or the climate pact and the climate law that Elena is going to talk about, to the financing, investment, to the circular economy, industrial strategy. And the ones that have a little tick are the ones that have already been announced, and the strategies have just have been announced in the last 5 months. Eliminating pollution, ensuring a just transition for all, financing again of green projects, making our homes energy efficient, leading the green change globally, continuing in this role of Europe leading on climate change. The strategy from farm to fork about our food and making our food systems more sustainable, protecting nature and the biodiversity strategy that came out last month, and finally promoting clean energy. So you see this huge array of work, of plans, of strategies, of targets, of actions that are being worked on, and there's also a big budget to go with that. So we have already announced that for the green investment, there was the Green Deal investment plan had €1 trillion that were going to be spent in the next decade. And now the new Commission long-term budget that was announced at the speech that I just showed a quote from has 1.85 trillion. That's the recovery plan, and a big part of that is about financing this transition. And that's why areas like the Just Transition Fund, which was the one that makes sure that all the areas that need a faster transition, or where the transition is going to be more painful, that they get support, that has been strengthened, and so has the Rural Development Fund. So moving to the communication part, because all the strategies are good, but if you don't get them known to people, or to those who need to take action, then really you won't fulfill all your goals. And I think the name of this webinar, Think, Act, Change, suits perfectly our objectives, because the first objective of the communication campaign that we are preparing is to raise awareness, to look at how people think about sustainability issues, about the Green Deal, and about the climate emergency. So first we need to ensure that, I mean, all of you know what we're talking about, but a lot of others don't, or don't believe it's such an urgency. And so the first stage is really about raising awareness. The second is about acting, so triggering this public support that where the EU solutions to the climate and the biodiversity crisis can be used as a way to accelerate, to enlarge, to scale up the solutions that already exist, and to make the transformations we're talking about. And then the third is the change part, which is what you want to talk about in this webinar, which is about convincing citizens to make more sustainable choices, changing their lives, changing behaviors. So if we look at, and I have 3 more slides just to show you a little bit the campaign messages as we had thought about them, and as we have rethought of them post-COVID. So the first one is about ensuring that people understand that the economic recovery and the transition go hand in hand. And you can't separate and say, I'll do one. There's this false dichotomy that you often hear, it's the economy or something else. Well, no, you have to do it both, and you have to do it at the same time. And it's very important, and I think this crisis underlines that even more. Then the next slide shows that what the EU is doing, and that's very important to show all the actions that are going to be taken, and how this green transition creates opportunities, how it can benefit people's health, the environment. I mean, now that people have been out and seen nature and heard the birds sing in cities, I think it's going to be easier to visualize what we're talking about. So in that sense, there's a certain benefit, if I could say that, in this crisis. So to show the opportunity, to show the benefits, and also to reassure people that this transition will not leave anyone behind, and that's why we have a whole part of this Green Deal that is focused on making sure that the areas and the people that need support will get it. And then there's going to be a lot of funding. I talked about it. So it's very important that the funding it goes to the right places, that it's used, the actions, that there's going to be a lot of different opportunities, that people know about them, take advantage of them quickly, so that they can bear results, and that we can move forward, because there's going to be a lot of waves of different actions and funding opportunities. And then finally, on the global front, it's very important to show that, because we often get the question, well, it's fine if Europe does it, but what if the rest of the world, you know, keep burning coal or whatever? Well, this is what Europe is also a cheerleader for the climate, and really leading the whole global climate action now more than ever. So this is another big part of the Green Deal. And lastly, as I said before, all this cannot happen if individual citizens don't also see their role in this. You can't say it's just for governments, or it's just for businesses, or it's just for a neighbor to do it. Everybody needs to become responsible, because our individual choices as consumers are part of this systemic transition towards a more sustainable economy, towards more sustainable business models. So this is what I wanted to say in terms of the context of where we are, where we were and where we are now post-COVID. That hasn't changed. It has increased our resolve, as I said. It has increased also the resources, and a lot of the packages that we had, like the biodiversity, like the farm to fork strategy, were slightly delayed, but have still been announced, and the strategies are out there. So we need to catch up a little bit, but we haven't lost a lot of time in terms of, you know, the bigger picture of the strategic rollout of the initiatives. And our campaign has been delayed a little bit, but it's still planned for the end of the year to accompany all these initiatives that are going to be taking place. Sorry, I was a bit longer than you wanted, but there's the before and after that takes a little bit more time. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Well, is it just the same slides then now, Claire, the same slideshow to continue for?
Just one more
Elena?
slide for Elena, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Elena, over to you. Tell us all about the Climate Pact. And David's just going to put up that last slide, which is going to tell the whole story. So let's go that side of the deck. We had
It's just one slide. Okay, it's one slide. That's good.
Keep that one.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, this slide indeed says it all, because it invites you all to reply to our public consultation, which will allow us to move on the Climate Pact. And this is quite important to say. There is nothing baked yet by the Commission, by the European Commission or the institutions, as people are used to. But this pact will not be a legislation. It will be co-created, if you wish, by people. So it will be all what people want to make out of it. And as we proudly say, where the regulation stops, this is where the pact can make a difference. So the overall idea of this Climate Pact actually comes from the past. You will all remember streets full of young people rioting for climate awareness. And this showed us that there is some sort of intergenerational split that needs to be brought forward by understanding, you know, what's really happening, what we can do by policy and what everybody can do, but actually also raising a little bit better understanding of intricacies of scientific approaches. And I must say the COVID period has shown exactly the same. So we had some sort of joint learning to the new attitudes on behaviors, but actually also to science. So we are probably very pretentious, but we wish to build a new European space for society where it will meet with climate action, also beyond the usual and formalized channels. So it is really about engaging And this may help Astrid from Denmark, George from Portugal, or Piotr from Poland, you know, to really try a space to contribute with collective wisdom in these all hands on deck behavior, and open indeed the established bubbles. I really like, Joe, what you said at the beginning. Now, let me put it very straight. This shouldn't be the breeding ground for denialists or climate skeptics. So this is really not about spreading disinformation, seeking ideological divisions, about making beliefs out of scientific facts. No, denialist skeptics are really not invited. Now, we know from our past that don'ts normally do not work. So we need to create this sort of can-do, it works culture, because this is what definitely attracts the other. Now, we want actually to create opportunities for individuals to join the initiatives that are already there, because we also don't want to pretend that we start from very scratch. So if there are afforestation initiatives by school children, or if there are you know, joint public procurement going on for clean bus fleets, or if there are, for instance, new buildings and infrastructure that is built for energy efficiency or for withstanding the windstorms, that's quite important. But we are all aware that behind every decision to refurbish a house to a higher energy standard, or to leave your car behind, or to create a park on a brown field, or to just reduce rubbish, there are individual choices, and we need to actually work on those. So what do we want to achieve with the Pact? It's first to empower a grassroots movement to display the climate initiatives and aim for more. So a school that wants to fix a green roof, a small business that wants to have bikes for the employees, a mayor that wants to build a water catchment area, residents of panel house that want to go for renovation, but that want to scale it up, and they are really looking for innovative solutions, for partners, for finance, and so on. We wish to raise the awareness about the opportunities and solutions that are already out there. So it's I know, I care, I can. So it's beyond the climate laws and regulations of this world. It's about really getting a sense of common objective, something that should be irreversible. So mayors can be part of the Pact, and we are here building already on a very powerful assembly of mayors in the European Union, which is called Covenant of Mayors. Youth is very much welcome to join exactly through the different programs, education program that Europe is very proud of, like Erasmus, like Twinning, and other programs. And I must tell you, youth is very, very interested to do so. We have heard a lot of individual action is just a drop in the ocean, and you know, getting people on bikes, on salads, off airplanes, and off regular showers, you know, cannot deliver what industries, corporations should do. So let us be very clear, they are not off the hook. We have a lot of legislation in Europe that subjects these firms to obligations. But you know, when I'm a CEO of a firm and I come home, I want also to have fresh air, and I want to have clean water. And we see that there are very inspirational CEOs that actually push the strategy of a firm exactly because they believe that they can make a difference. We have seen it in Australia with a petition of 1,000 engineers to really push fossil fuel business to work on reducing of emission. We have seen the Amazon leadership to be challenged by the employees on climate action. We had seen here Bellevue scrapping some of its support for cars and replacing it by other solutions. So just to say, this is a new way of going about, climate action, going more into the sphere where Europe has been a little bit shy, because talking about lifestyle or behavioral changes was just not à la mode. But I think that also this period has allowed us to be bolder on our attitudes. We have tested what I would call really a deep adaptation in our, living rooms when talking to the others. So I'm really hopeful that by the end of this year, we will be able to roll out massively, this climate pact, and we are already gathering climate ambassadors, those who want to walk with us towards the end of the year. And I'm really hopeful that I will recruit some also today in this talk. Thanks.
Thank you, Elena. Lots to digest there from the double act of the European Commission. Thank you so much. So the challenge seems to be behavioural change and making sure that that's mainstream somehow. And we're going to hear now from Cecilia, who actually runs a company or works for a company where sustainability does make financial sense. So Cecilia, share some of your insights, please.
Yes, please. I'll be happy to do so. I'm just trying to get the...
Great.
So, can you see my screen now?
Perfect.
Excellent. What I want to tell you a little bit is thank you, first of all, to Joe and David for inviting me to speak and Oatly to speak here and will be represented. And thank you also for very good introductory remarks on behalf of the European Commission, inspiring, and I would really like to applaud you taking steps in the right direction. Thank you very much for that. And I would like to just shortly describe Oatly. I'm sure that many people don't know about the company, but actually it is a company built on the very idea of change, because that is what this webinar is about, and that's what you're addressing as well. From the European Commission, that is needed. And what many people, this was actually based on a research project at Lund University in south of Sweden, where there was a research project studying the factors behind lactose intolerance. And one of the PhD students in this research group, he thought, oh, so the majority of people are actually suffering from lactose intolerance or allergy against the protein in cow's milk. And he saw in this a fantastic business opportunity. And his philosophy, and his name is, and that's our founder, Rickard Öster, and his philosophy was, it is much more effective use of natural resources, do not take the detour through an animal, but go straight from the field to the consumers, and that's how we started. So, and our company is all about embracing change, challenging norms as well, I must say. And since we are a company based on research, it's to us essential that everything we do and claim and state is based on research. That's super important to us as a company. We're a research-based company. You could actually say that we're a food tech company. We're one of the few companies having food tech companies having several patents, which is quite unusual within the food industry. We only do oats. Oats, we love oats. We're crazy about oats. So what we do is oat-based dairy, and what we are about is that we want to make it easy for people to eat better and live healthier lives without recklessly taxing the planet's resources in the process. And just to move on, so this is actually our business idea. It is based on sustainability. And these are our core values. And those are the reason why I joined the company 4 years ago. We promised to make a statement that you promise to be a good company. That's quite a bold statement, because that is committing. You cannot say that and not stick to it. However, we do not claim in any point that we are a perfect company, but we have genuine ambitions that we want to do our very, very best in terms of sustainability, nutritional health, and trust. And just to what I would like just to link back to what you have been talking about is, there's a shift going on right now. There are people, consumers, that push, not only on the streets, but actually through their consumption, pushes for a shift, which I find very inspiring. And I must say, from my perspective, I've never seen such a big gap between generations, but also between different groups of people. And I think you can all see it around the world right now in different contexts. But what we are all about is to promote a transition of the food system. The food system we have created is broken. And if we talk about climate impact, you cannot neglect the food system. And of course, it's uncomfortable to point to the truth, but it needs to be pointed out, and there needs to be political action on it. And it was I was pleased to read the Farm to Fork strategy, which was presented by the new Commission some weeks ago, where it is pointed out that we need a transition. And of course, Elena, we will absolutely give input on the invitation to comment on the Climate Pact. It's a good initiative. I do hope that there will be the courage and boldness necessary to promote this transition, because we cannot act fast enough, so to speak. And just to share with you, because our philosophy is to help people shift from animal-based dairy to plant-based dairy, because you reduce the climate impact, you promote a healthy life, and that is also what I find positive about the Farm to Fork strategy. It does link the two, because it's not separate, it's not silos. And just to finish off on a note, that it is really, really inspiring them to see that this is where the growth rate happens. So this slide just shows the number of employees. As you can see, we're a very small company. I joined in 2016, in the beginning, and at the beginning of 2016, we were just below 100 people. Now, and these are the figures till 2018. Now we are 550 people around the world. And by 2022, we count on being about 1,500 employees. And of course, looking at our turnover, again, it's small figures. These are Swedish figures, but you just take away 1 0 and you have about €1. And here you can see how the turnover have grown. Also, again, since over the past years, we've had a fantastic growth rate. And just for you to have something to relate to, a normal so-called organic growth rate within the food industry is a couple of %. Most big companies grow by buying small, fast-growing companies. And it's also within this industry that most of the innovations happen. And that is something that needs to be promoted, of course, because here is where you have the opportunities, and here is where I think EU can take a leading role. I would like to also finish off on that when we talk about Farm to Fork strategy, which is the EU agenda at the very heart of the Green Deal. It is very important. I would like to share 2 examples during the seminar about from the farm and to the fork, how you can engage consumers. We are absolutely convinced that there are very effective ways of doing that, and I can tell more from our consumer engagement, and also about what you can do at farm level, because farmers need help. They are businesses as well. And today there's a system that is so distorting, and that I'm very, very critical about. But I'd love to share more of that. But I put a close to I can speak on this for hours, but I stop there for now.
Thank you, Cecilia. We're going to have time for some questions afterwards, and there's some meaty topics there indeed, agricultural reform, systemic change in the food industry, and so forth. We're going to jump now from Europe to Latin America, to a man who's focused actually more on engagement itself, the kind of mechanics of engagement. And Jonathan, you have said, and I quote you, "We might not be experts on the climate crisis, but we are experts in citizen involvement." So please, tell us how.
So, well, thank you very much. And I think I'm sharing, or David is sharing my screen. So sometimes I will ask him to move. We started this initiative called FEAS 8 years ago from Santiago de Chile because we wanted to give visibility to NGOs and social initiatives, and social innovation and sustainability were being taking place just in conference, in small rooms, in small congresses. And we thought, you know, we need to take this energy and those initiatives to the streets, because if not, they will be talking and will be debating with the same people every time. So we create this initiative, first of all, to raise the awareness and accelerate a cultural change. So David, in the second, we have like our, like, I don't know if it's a mantra, but we repeat all the time, and it's that we don't have time to do things in the traditional way, because the traditional way has been giving the solutions that has been given from the traditional way. They are not getting in the time that we needed, and they have been very not give the solutions that we're trying to create. So that's why we create FEAS. And David, please, the next slide, please. I'm sorry. And so we are a global platform. We really started in Santiago de Chile, but now we are in 16 cities around the world, basically in Latin America. But now we go to Europe, to Spain, and we have been working to Glasgow for the COP26 now. Well, it will be on the next year, so we'll see. But it's a global platform that seeks to accelerate a cultural transformation for sustainable development. And it's really interesting because we haven't started like this with these words because we didn't know about them. We just know that we want to create and raise awareness. But now with the SDGs and what we learned from the European Commission that we work through in Latin America, we're a global platform that accelerates this cultural transformation. And how we do it, and this is very important because a lot of talk, a lot of inspiration, how we make that inspiration goes to action, okay? And I don't know, David, if you can go to the 25, because I'm going to pass this a lot. And if you can go a little bit, yes. Before, please, just before, I'm sorry, before. Yes. So there, we create, I'm sorry, it's moving, but we create a street action festival. You will see in the number 25, David. And we have a video here. I don't know if you can put it.
Sorry, but is it this one? Is this the right one?
No, one more, please. One more, please. One
this
more,
one.
please.
This one?
No. It's number 25. Yes, there you are. So we're a street action festival. And what does it mean? That we put together the inspiration, the NGOs, the social companies, the B Corps. I don't know if you're familiarized with the B Corp movement, but here in Latin America, it's very, it has been gained a lot of awareness because companies are taking their business not just for their economic part, for the social part and the ambiental part. So when you have those three elements together, you can make a lot of changes. And we create this street action festival. David, the next one, please. When we put live music and workshops and talks and panels and events in public spaces, and we mix them and we put them together, so we can talk about sustainability and put those examples to people and connect those young audience with them not just to raise the awareness, but to make some action. So after we make all these festivals and events, a lot of new collaborations come in. A lot of more people know about what it means to be, what is sustainability, what are B Corps, how we can understand the, I don't know, the European Green Deal, etc. And that formula, it's very connected with the cities, and it's focused on cities, not on countries, because we work, I identify local leaders, and David, please, the next one, just one more. We identify local leaders because local leaders in different cities are our rock stars, as we say, because they are facing these challenges and working together and make collaboration. And we invite all the city different actors and players around it, local government, media, NGOs, musicians, together to make this exercise. And what is our formula, I will say? It's radical collaboration. And what it means, radical collaboration, and that's in the next slide, please. Well, of course, this is for everyone. It's a very diversity initiative around the city. That's a photo of one of our years, and you will see a lot of people going together with this spirit. But it's all about radical collaboration. And radical collaboration means that we will go for our purpose together, and we will find the different players that can be in the old way of thinking competitors, but no, they are not in this moment, or maybe they are, but they will not be in the future because they will go under a purpose. And that will say that we work with a lot of different peoples around the world, more than, I don't know, 1,200 organizations in different parts of the world, to make this exercise that it's a real-time live collaborative exercise, but that in the end, what it shows is a way of doing. And it's difficult to try to change, to make a cultural change. How you measure a cultural change in the end? How much time do you need for that? So David, please, one more slide. Next one. We stand, of course, for sustainability, and the medium is the message. Like the actions that we do are the message. Like how we put, not in words, of course in words, but how we put it in the real world, the actions to make people understand that what they can do and what they can achieve if they change a little bit their behaviors. It's not easy, it's slow sometimes, and you can be very frustrated sometimes, but in the end, we are accelerating this cultural change. And David, please, one more, I will, and this is for us, what is, I have talked about, it's how we make people collaborate. And it's an exercise, and it's really very important to put yourself in the foot of the other person that you are inviting to collaborate. So if we want to talk about sustainability, what we see and how we see the other one and his initiative, and how we can combine them and put everyone together for one purpose. So one more, David, and with that I'm ending. We make people work together. So speakers, innovation, private companies, governments, media, artists, cooperatives, universities, and everyone together to build this exercise. Because if you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you should go together, and that's we said all the time. So I just want to end this part that we have been working 2019. We have been working for COP25, but in Chile, a social crisis explodes, and the event moves to Madrid, and we were making festivals all around the country with the help of the European Union, because we have been chosen to be like a street action festival to create awareness and about sustainability. And now we are starting a digital national dialogue plan with media campaigns to raise the awareness about Chile going to be carbon neutral on 2050 and all this message. So that's who we are. We are an initiative to accelerate a cultural change. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you're really unpicking there the engagement device for us, for the mechanism there. David, do you want to get in with a question to the team?
Sure. So we've had some really meaty questions in the chat. It's going to be difficult to maybe go into the more granular policy questions for the EC representatives, just because we want to have a debate that can be inclusively applied to the four speakers. But we'll try and see if we can integrate some of these points into the discussion. Thanks to everyone for brilliant presentations, by the way. We do always ask for 3 minutes, but it never really works. So I just wanted to ask, because in a way you're all proposing, you know, systemic behavioral change, but you're approaching it in different ways. And this reflects to some of the questions that I saw there in terms of how you can nudge people into different kinds of behavior. I was wondering that from the extreme side, I'd say Jonathan's festivals are the nice cop version of getting people into the sustainability mindset by offering these beautiful events and this wonderful atmosphere. I'd say Cecilia as well with Oatly, you're also selling, but you're making it an enjoyable experience to be sustainable by buying into the fun brand that is Oatly. And then on the European Commission side, I think that you're providing these frameworks, but you're also trying to incentivize the collaboration. So I just wanted to ask where you all stand in terms of what is the dividing line between incentive and, on the other side, I don't want to say coercion, but perhaps a more forceful way of bringing people over to the sustainability way of thinking. So how that reflects to if the ones who are on one side are thinking about the other side and vice versa, if that makes sense. Would you like to say a few words about that? Perhaps we could start with whichever one of you wants to have a go. Cecilia?
So, I'm not sure, David, I got your question correctly there, but between the difference between coercion and incentive, and can I give some practical examples? I think there are different forces at hand here, and of course we all know how finances do dictate the conditions and the market conditions. They're still very valid, and what I find positive is, first of all, how sustainability actually attracts investors now. I think that is one of the key things, which is both a coercion and an incentive, I think, because money do really dictate. And I know, for instance, within the plant-based segment of food industry, there is estimates that the market for alternative meat products will reach $20 billion per year by 2025, and that there will be an annual growth rate with 28% over the next coming years. And what I didn't mention in my starting remark is that we have doubled over the last year, between 2018 and 2019, we have doubled our turnover to 2 billion Swedish crowns, as we refer to, of course. And between the dairy segment, it's even higher due to, as I mentioned to you earlier, due to intolerance and allergies. So I think that is one very important facet to take into account, and where there's lots of innovation. And we know in US there are lots of investments in developing new processed food, new technologies, new innovations, and where I would like to highlight that that can be the solutions to feeding a growing population with the limit that we have with one planet. So that is one criticism I would have with the farm to fork strategy, that it points to process as something that's negative. I disagree with that fundamentally. That could be the solution. When it comes to also where I think nudging can be a really effective way, we're strong advocates of climate footprint labeling. But I would even call it declaration instead of labeling. And let me explain to you what I mean by that, the difference. Because today, if we keep talking about finances, the price of a good, irrespective if it's food or if it's clothing or if it's a computer, is the price that is the competitive, how you call it, the competitive factor. That's what consumers are guided by. In food sector, that's certainly the case. And that is highly misleading because, as we know today, food is so much too cheap, not taking into account the real costs it has in terms of environmental impact. So to what you call internalized externalities. And so what you're guided by today is the price, and then you have a nutrition declaration. I think it would be fantastic if you would have a mandatory climate footprint printed on all products. Foods is of course what we are advocating. We've started doing that as a company. So we are we're relying on a methodology developed by a third party, which is based on 20 years of research. And we've also raised a petition in Germany where we managed to get 50,000 signatures within a month among consumers demanding climate footprint. And I see a high risk talking about climate labeling, because then it could be like a label not indicating a figure. It needs to be in absolute figures. And then the counter argument would be, well, how would you know? It doesn't mean anything. Well, everybody knows the difference between 1 and 20. And if you're given over time with quick learners, you can relate to that. Then it's not only the price in itself. And also we think that this could be an incentive for business, because everybody wants to be better, and what you measure, you can see and you can relate to. And as a consumer, you can make an informed decision. So that is about consumer empowerment. And we know it's very, very positive. And then I think a problem today when it comes to cursive as well is that there are many regulations and different legal frameworks or policy frameworks that are preserving old school behavior, and all system doesn't promote system change. And of course, it's many big actors' interest not to change the system. And here is where we need to go ahead. And just to for instance, within my own area, an example is the school milk subsidy. So school milk is subsidized among all schools. The plant-based drinks, no. And the reason for it, and there is a EU regulation under the Common Agriculture Policy CAP, formulating it is about establishing food habits among young people. That is the purpose of it. It's a market thing, which is one example. Another example, which is fresh going on now within the European Parliament, is that there is an amendment suggesting that you're not allowed to call soy burger, because the consumers should be confused. And as I spoke to Nestlé, who one company among many who sell these kind of products, they have never had a complaint from a consumer being surprised to find soy in the soy burger. So I think that's just one very concrete example of lots of example of distorting and hindering a shift, which we all agree on is absolutely necessary. And I have loads of more examples, but I just wanted to give you that. You can see I can talk for hours on this, but I just wanted to be a bit concrete to your question, David.
I wonder if Tina or Elena want to respond to that in terms of, do you have something to say in response?
I can go first, maybe. So yeah, indeed, this is a very good question, because there's a broad spectrum of action, and basically you need both. You can't just have kind of nudging without rules to make sure that, you know, everybody that there's a level playing field. So this is, I mean, if I could draw like three areas of where we do that. All these strategies that we're talking about, they set out targets of where we want to go, and then how we want to get there. And the actors who are supposed to take the actions, whether it's national governments doing strategies, for instance, for as part of the climate law, because the climate law that Lena can speak about also, it's a legally binding law. That's what we're talking about, that you need a heavy hand. You need to have legally binding instruments. So for those areas where you do that, you use the instruments that are the most appropriate. The same thing, for instance, for the plastic strategy, where there was a plastic ban that started slowly and is going to make all plastic packaging reusable or recyclable by 2030. And where there's some materials, you already know that a lot of plastic utensils or other commonly used plastic consumer products are not going to be used anymore. So you start with the nudging in some cases, but you need to have a legally binding target or some framework where you can make sure that everybody comes along. You know, you can't just get half of your those who care to do what they can, and the rest just keep using what they've been using. And then to take it also from the examples that Cecilia was mentioning about our food industry, the new farm to fork strategy has a very clear part about food labeling, and where there's going to be, so it looks at three main areas, you know, how we produce food, how we process food, and how we consume food. And there's actions for every single area. And for the third area, the consumption, so that's where we're talking more about the nudging, that's where the labeling, the food labeling that is going to be proposed is going to look not only at the nutritional value of products, but also the climate, the environmental, and also the social value of what we eat, so that consumers can have a clear picture. I hope it's going to be clear. I don't know what it's going to look like, but that's the intention. So consumers can know what are the the impact of the products that they buy, and then, you know, it's up to them to buy. We're not going to tell you, no, don't buy this or that, but you need to know. And many people fear or feel that they don't know enough so to make the right choices. And this is where the first action is going to be, in terms of giving that information to consumers, giving them the power to make the right choices. Thank you.
I wonder just if Nony, you have something to say. I mean, you're from the different world, a different side of the fight to persuade people. But is there, what's your thoughts about coercion and persuasion, and how can we, you know, get the maximum results?
No, I just want to say in this a different angle, that in a continent like Latin America, which is the most inequality continent, has a lot of undeveloped countries, you don't have the choose to have a choice. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can not, the power of the people to get the products that will make sense for everything that we're talking, you have in the for a minimum quantity of people, and that inequality in this continent and this country makes that prices is the first thing that will kill everything. And of course you can have the information and you will know that it will make better for your life and all the things, but you cannot do it. So it's very important to understand when we're talking about giving power of the people to make their choices is that a lot of those people cannot do that, and are just again the people that are in a different part of the economic society, if you want to say, that can do that. But I just want to say that you need, as Tina said, you need both. You need everything to make this happen, because the angles of the reflection and to go that action are very different. Just want to say that.
Yeah, can I just come in? Thanks so much for that, Nony. Yeah, you're not in this bubble. We kind of we tend to always like get into the bubble conversation. So we're just trying to we're going to try and kind of keep it open. I was just reading at the same time as listening to a lot of the questions there. And a lot of them I think could be worthy of input to the Climate Pact itself, because they're quite specific. But I just wanted to pick up on a couple there, and going to your point, Nony, about money, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people now especially are going to be unemployed. There's financial hardship. There's a whole new actual world even beyond COVID now. You know, it's about Black Lives Matter, it's about social justice. And how does that figure in our conversations when we talk about sustainability and motivating people to take action on climate change, whether it's a company, like a social festival, or indeed the Green Deal. Is the Green Deal social enough in terms of its communication? This is the lens through which the world is happening right now. So what are your thoughts on that? I'd appreciate that. And whoever wants to go first, I don't know, Nony, you're there on my screen?
Yeah. May I go in?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, first of all, very good question, because a lot of our studies and analysis shows that environmental pressures, climate impacts actually very much overlap with socioeconomics. So those that are most vulnerable and exposed, they get on top of the everyday struggles and vulnerabilities. Yet the environmental degradation, I mean, you have certainly seen the study in the US that showed that indeed the Black Americans were those that died because they had no hospital, they had degraded air pollution, and there are all these linkages in between. So I think when we act on environment, we act exactly in the spirit of solidarity and equity, that it does matter. And it shouldn't, end up as the tragedy of common. It's a common good, so nobody acts. No, to the contrary, everybody should act on it. Now, in Europe, Europe has 2 weeks ago adopted this groundbreaking proposal on new recovery. So how we will get out of this crisis, how we will bounce back better. And if you look at the fine print of it, really it is about a green transition which should go to the most vulnerable areas, to the poorest areas in Europe, with a lot of assistantship, with a lot of good advice, and a lot of responsibilities also given to national member states, because they will have 680 billion plus to be channeled through their budget for good projects, so that they people, you know, that were in I would say these old economy can find other livelihoods. And although it sounds naive, I think we have been in this situation before. I'm half Czech, half Slovak. I have lived in my 90s when I was a student. I lived actually how enterprises of my parents went bust, how they had to find completely new lives. And today, when you see the dynamic of my country, you will understand that it is always possible to pull up and to find this energy. So indeed, acting on environment, we are acting also in favor of the least insured, of the most vulnerable.
I wonder if someone else wants to reflect upon inclusivity in terms of approach, especially there's someone, Sabra, is asking about gender, how gender can be well represented. I mean, you are all women, but that doesn't necessarily mean, I suppose, that well, except for Nony, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the campaigns are particularly focused on that kind of representativity or inclusivity. So just to continue upon that point, if someone else wants to make a comment.
I just want to say, if I can, that the different crises that we are seeing are all tied together, and if we try to separate them, it will be a complete mess. So it's my opinion. So social and ambient crises are mostly the same one, and we will. I think we will see in the future how these different angles are tied together, and we will not be talking about ambient or social or economic, because everything is part of it. It's in the end the same. But I understand in this moment of life they are exploding from different parts and different angles. So how you will talk about, we were talking about this in Latin America, how you will talk about sustainability now if you have some social crisis before, and you need to, and in the end, what we're trying to do is to connect them and understand everyone of us how to approach with the different angles. So just want to say that we need to tie them and not separate them.
There's an awful buzzword that usually comes up in this situation called intersectionality. As a word itself, I find it really long and cumbersome, but it does represent exactly that point of how we need to have a holistic approach to all of the different problems we're facing. I was talking with Joe about there's a podcast called Mothers of Invention with the Mary Robinson Foundation and a comedian. They say climate change is a man-made problem with a feminist solution. So I think that you will sort of approaching that as well, that we're feeling a lot more that like all of these things are connected. So I don't know if one of the other speakers has something to say.
I could just chip in on that, because that gender aspect is one that is very interesting, and I fully agree with Jonathan that you really and what you said, David, about the intersectionality and having to look at where all these things are cross each other, and we can't really separate the problems, but it is important to look at the different aspects, especially for us as communicators, because when you look at gender, for instance, and you look at surveys, you see that women are more concerned about the environment than men in general, in average. I'm not saying all women and all men. So, we also have studies, and I think Elena mentioned about the more vulnerable groups, and many times women are amongst those vulnerable groups. So they're the ones that will have to suffer some of the consequences more sometimes. And the point is that when you are asking for change, or when you're promoting a certain change to happen, you need to know who is the actor who's going to make that change happen. And women, for instance, in most countries still do a lot of the shopping. Or the other tasks that have a climate impact. I think it's important that when you're communicating about these choices, you understand who is the audience that is going to make those choices. On the flip side, you have probably, if you're going to buy a car, I'm talking very gender stereotypes, but I think in a lot of countries, this is still, at least in my family, this is still true, that I would let the choice of car to my husband, and that's when you want to see, how you target men to make the right choices when it comes to sustainable transport, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, I think it's important when you communicate to know who are the actors of change, and to try to target them in the way that they care about and they understand the most. So intersectionality, yes, but sometimes you need to unpack before you can pack it all together. Thanks.
Can I add on that? I think, you're touching upon a very, very big and key question, obviously, and I agree, Nony, with what you're saying. And and it's really difficult to, there's not one answer. Everything hangs together. I'm absolutely with you on that. And the food system is, of course, central. That is, and that has also partly what has contributed to putting us in this very unequal world which we are all living in, and we are all privileged here, many of us. What I do find, I do genuinely in my heart hope that we are moving towards something better, and I believe that. And what I would say, and if you put a gender on the issue, I think that is relevant. And what I can see from our perspective is that we can see a shift in behavior where for the first time people choose to consume food due to the impact it has on climate and the planet. And they actually change their behavior and consumption patterns from what they've been taught by their parents to save the world, and not for their health. Because if I look at my generation, and if you are privileged that you can't choose what food to buy, you have chosen it for ego-driven reasons, like to be fit, to look good, to enjoy, to feel pleasure, comfort eating, and so forth. And I find that is so heartwarming that we can see a push now driven primarily by young people and primarily young women. And I've spoken to, and as you all know, there are many still of the decision makers of my generations are still dominated by men. And I've spoken to many men in the 50s who have been convinced by their teenage daughters to change their eating behaviors, because their daughters have been consistent, and me working for the company I do, they know about Oatly due to their daughters. And I find that makes me moved, because there is something in there which is very powerful. And that is also what we've seen, where we see on completely different issues, where people do take to the streets, not now given the situation, but where we have Greta Thunberg has become a really symbol of this movement, so to speak. I find that inspiring. And also what I find, coming back to the food system here, I was reflecting after your comment, Nony, is if you look at the situation today in terms of public health, we have a situation, because remember that we had a UN goal to eradicate hungerness. You don't say hungerness, I can't find the word, but you understand what I'm talking about. I'm turning Swedish here now. We have almost reached that, which is amazing. However, because today we have about 900 million or 800 million people who have too little to eat, whereas we have the double that are obese or overweight. And what is a completely disturbed and new development is that we have people who are malnutritioned and starving, but overweight and obese, because of the food system we've created with completely wrong food habits, smoking, drinking too much, and not exercising. And that is actually the leading cause globally of death. It's 68% is due to lifestyle diseases, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, diabetes type 2, etc. So I just, it raised so many things and reflections in my head listening to you, Nony. And I would like to just share with you a final story, which is important. It's important to hear inspiration. And it's a young man. It's a farmer named Adam. He lives in middle of Sweden. He runs a small farm. He's taken over from his parents. And it's a sheep farm. And normally, if you're a farmer, what you need to do is to grow volume to make money out of it. That's the system we have created. However, he was very hesitant in doing so, because he felt that that's the wrong way to go forward. It has to be going more plant-based. And he calls himself as a farmer, and which I find so nice, Planet Caretakers. A Planet Caretaker. Isn't that a nice title to use for yourself as a farmer? And we entered into, he contacted us, and we entered into a research project with him where he was going to make a slight transition to diversify the product of his farm, and also transition from animal-based to more plant-based. And I'm looking down at the figures here. And so in year one, what he produced was 10% for direct human consumption, and 90% was animal farming. And just with the help of a researcher, with a small adjustment from 10 to 26% of what the farm produced for human consumption, he managed to triple the number of people the farm could feed from 60 to 188. Well, I find that inspiring given what the challenges we are facing, because that means that we can solve them. And thanks to innovative young people like Adam, he more than halved his emissions of greenhouse gases from 1.7 ton per person to 0.72 ton per person. And of course, the land use, goes without saying, was much more effective, talking about hectare per person. So there are inspiring examples driven by young men as well. I wanted to show you, because farmers are at the heart, irrespective of where we are in the world, but conditions are dictated by the finance system, obviously. And last point on Adam is that we have now entered into an EU-funded project on this, where we were recruiting 10 farmers in Sweden as part of a EU-funded project called Uniseco. And we were a bit worried that nobody would be interested, because it's so challenging to go through a transition, because the system have promoted a certain way of production. This is not least the case in developing countries, where it's been monoculture, and it's like money dictates what you're going to farm. And we thought nobody will want to apply. Will we even get 10 farmers here in Sweden? In a small country like Sweden, we attracted more than 100 farmers, animal farmers, who are interested in transition, but traditions, regulations, money, culture, policy framework dictates a different path to them. So they weren't sure how to go about it, and they were lacking a platform to have that discussion. And so I just wanted to share with you that story. I think we need the stories to be inspired as well, and they're out there. And I genuinely believe that we are moving towards something better.
Thank you. I've just been reading the chat and listening to the story. That's really an inspiring story about how systemic change can happen just by having somebody who's just willing to do it, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's just like somebody just needs to take the lead and bring it on and bring partners along. I really love what Nony said about partnerships. That's really important, because none of us can do anything alone, really. I think there's a lot of detailed questions I'm seeing in the chat, and I just wonder if some of the people who have really super detailed questions for people from Tina and Elena maybe can input into the Climate Pact or ask direct, because that's really some of them are really quite specific. But some of the general issues, I mean, it comes to kind of what I noted so far is like radical, the word radical. We need to bring it on, we need to make it urgent, and we need to scale it and speed it up. So we have radical collaboration. Nony, thanks for that. We have kind of radical intersectionality. Let's like break through these artificial divisions and silos in the policy, the communication. I mean, social, gender, environment, all of those different issues. In fact, yeah, they are all blended into the same human motivation to want to have a good life, whatever that means, and helped to make the right choices. And we also have, of course, radical storytelling. I love that, Cecilia. Storytelling is a really important way to make sure that everybody can understand our own perspectives, and that's often the best way to tell stories on especially really complicated issues, which some people may feel the terminology, the Green Deal and the Climate Pact. I mean, even these words we feel sometimes, you know, have they been overused? Are we on the kind of the right vibe? And I think some of the wording that Nony had in your deck there, and Cecilia you had in your deck, you know, it's kind of a bit more simple, a bit more clear, it's a bit more engaging. And of course that's because you're face to face with people. That's no criticism of our friends in the Commission, because they have a massive job to bring all of that policy together and then turn it into a language which everybody can get. And that's of course then 27, 28 languages as well on top of that. I just have, we actually as the time has flown past and we only have a few more minutes, I just wanted to ask like a quick fire question to you all. So if there's one change, this is like wish time, if there's one change that you could really wish for that would help speed up and scale up this transformation to a more just, a more fair, and a more kind of climate neutral future, a better world for us all. Just in one sentence, what would that be? All of you, go.
Nobody wants to take the plunge.
Yeah.
I can take.
Elena.
No, go ahead, Elena. Go ahead.
Okay. Education. I think once we will all understand the carbon cycle and the water cycle, and it will be the basics of what everybody learns at school, we will be doing a lot.
Great. And that really fits with what we've been hearing in the last day or last week about changing curriculums in schools to reflect real history, to make sure that every part of our communities feel included actually in the kind of the common culture. Tina, you wanted to have a quick word?
Yeah, I think for me it would be clarity in the sense of knowing what to do and what is most impactful, because clearly we don't want to deprive people of everything, and if we go for such a proposition, it's not a winning proposition. So we really need to focus on what makes the most sense, what has the most impact, to make the changes that we want on the climate, to give people the information and the clarity so that they can, you know, as I said before, be empowered to make those choices. And the clarity comes from both sides, both what is happening at a systemic level from the government, from the EU, and also what individual choices can be made every day in our life, from what we eat to what we wear, to, you know, what we our transport, to our houses, to everything really. So that's for me the main. There's just too much information, and I don't think it's clear to people what are the most impactful changes.
Yeah, no, exactly. To be able to just know really fast when you're in the shop, you know, exactly, I should choose Oatly because it's got this, what did you call it? The climate declaration on the side. I like that. Something really simple, because there's a lot of, I mean, we're all a bit overwhelmed with information. So that's a really good point about clarity. Who wants to go next? Should we have Nony next? What do you think? What's your big wish?
Well, I have a lot, but I think that first of all, there are people that can do more, and I think our call is to them to do more in these times. Like for us, for example, in this continent, companies can do really more about it, and they drive a lot of the society policies and, I don't know, employment and everything. So if they can do a little bit more, people can get more information, as Cecilia said, can have more choices. They can be more just with their social ambient and with the communities around them. And I think that it's as Tina said, you cannot ask to everyone everything, and I'm totally agree with that. So I will focus this part of the effort in companies that can do a little bit more, and of course to give visibility, as Cecilia said, and give us that example to the real true heroes that are now on the field all the time and do the things taking risk and not also have their calculator in their hand. So I think inspire it's the energy to open those examples, and from inspiration to action. Also, I just want to say that there's a lot of people talking and give, but there's not all of those that are talking are doing in their own life the actions that we need. So the best example is that you can be coherent between what you think and what you do. So I will ask for, I don't know if in English it's like coherency, but that's my biggest wish in this moment.
And that's a really great, it's a word you often used in European policy, actually, policy coherency, to make sure that they all kind of interweave together and work effectively. So okay, so Cecilia, all down to you. The farmers, food, we all eat every day, we all drink every day. What needs to change? What needs to speed up?
Well, at a concrete level, I think the two examples I gave is to support farmers and to climate footprint, not labeling, footprint. I insist on that. But can I be a bit more visionary here, Joe?
Yes.
Take the opportunity. I joined this company for the sake of our daughters and their future. And what if that was not just pretty words, sustainability and about future generations? What if that was for real instead of economy? At the heart of the system, at the heart of the decision-making processes, for real, instead of, because we have created a system which is very much based and driven on consumption. And we know you're not happy by consumption. You can only, once you've reached the level that you can fulfill your basic needs, it doesn't make you happier. Many times it even makes you empty. So I think I would find it fantastic if we could create a society where nature and the well-being would be at the heart, because we're so many people, I know it, that are hungry for it. And then that would reflect in all the system changes that are needed. If I may say at that level, is very, but I think you can all relate to what I'm saying, yeah? You know what makes you happy? It's like being with the kids, being with friends, being out in the sea, being on a walk in the forest. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, totally well said, spot on. It's the simple things in life which give us pleasure, ultimately, including getting together with amazing people like yourselves and chatting about this on a Wednesday afternoon, putting the world to right. And it's all about systemic change. It's big stuff. It's really big stuff. And yeah, what do we have there? We had education, we had clarity, we had business, doing more, enabling, helping us all to just make it easy for us all to make the right choices when we go eat, or when we go walking or whatever. We're going to wrap up now, actually, and I just wanted to say it's been an amazing debate. David, you wanted to say something? Say thanks to everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to the speakers, and also to say that it was actually might have seemed like a kind of a strange combination, but when you think about it as the people who are providing the framework backed up by law, the people who are engineering the concrete collaborations, the company that's changing people's buying practices and changing behavior through business and through that offer. And then from Nony's side, the events on the streets, the activism, the way of bringing mass market in. And imagine how powerful it would be if all of those four actors just in this call were to actually coherently work together. And so that's what we need to push more and more towards if we're going to achieve our goals.
Absolutely. Radical transparency and radical collaboration, radical intersectionality. That's what
radical coherence.
Radical. Exactly. I'd like to just say a big thank you to our speakers. I hope you've enjoyed this debate. I have really immensely. Our audience has been massively engaged. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer everybody's questions. We'll keep the chat and we'll share it to the speakers, and especially there's lots of questions there to the European Commission on the detail. Thank you to Tina, thank you to Elena, thank you Cecilia, and thank you to Nony. It's been brilliant. Thank you to David, and
thank you to
we will see you next time. And think, act, change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye all.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening and or day.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Have fun. And we'll keep the chat and we'll share the video afterwards. And have a great evening. Next time we'll have a drink.
I hope
That
so.
would be nice.
One day we
Thank
will
you.
An oat drink.
Exactly.
Oat drink. We need some oat cocktails. We need oat cocktails.
Okay, bye.
A white Russian, oat Russian, oat Russian.
I'll
You
fix.
can have that for free.